we have been getting a lot of DMs, emails, text messages, Facebook messages, comments on YouTube. I mean, literally everything.
Yeah, wherever someone can reach us.
Yes.
We've been getting this.
Regarding the new study. Is it a study that's what it is? Or is
Yeah, well, it's a new study and it's coming out of Switzerland. It's about an epidural stimulator trial that was done over there. So they use an epidural stimulator, and what that is, to give you the details, is it's an array of electrodes on a little sheet, so to speak, that is implanted directly onto your spine. And those electrodes can be programmed to help people with paralysis use their limbs below the level of injury where they wouldn't have been able to before. Now this is super exciting, obviously, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, really cool. Although some of the articles because I read a lot of these articles, and a number of them were saying that this is the first time that this has been done. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
In fact, an estimated 100 or so individuals with spinal cord injury in the US have had epidural stimulators implanted on their spines. And it's working. It's working for a lot of people. It's making a huge difference in their lives. So it is awesome, and it's still very exciting stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the first time this has happened.
And a lot of people who message us were wondering, like, if Cole could get this and if this will allow him to walk, and, you know, just asking, is this, you know, the hope for Cole to walk again in the future?
I am hopeful. I think it's an amazing technology. It hasn't been refined to the point where, like, people are taking fluid steps. Like, it's still very much like
Robotic.
it's a struggle. It's like caveman steps, you know.
Yeah.
So the technology has a long way to go, and it's never going to solve all of the problems that come along with the spinal cord injury. The things that it does solve, it has been shown to give people voluntary control of their bowel.
You just put it together?
The bowel and bladder. Oh, yeah, not bowel. Control of their bladder and bowel again, which is huge.
Huge.
Sign me up for that. You know,
Yeah.
sign me up for that before walking. You know, I think there's a misconception about walking being like our number one priority.
Well, yeah, your number one priority. You know, we've talked to a lot of people who have spinal cord injuries, and anytime these studies come out and it's like, oh, you can walk again, I think a lot of people who aren't in Cole's situation automatically assume, oh, he wants to walk again. But there are so many things that come before walking, like bowel and bladder function, hand function, tricep function, sensation. All of those things trump walking. And so I think a lot of people kind of like misunderstand that, and the fact that like a lot of people with SCIs don't necessarily need to walk or want to walk. There's a lot of other things that they want first. Walking is cool, of course, but there are other things that if Cole got back, he'd be so ecstatic.
I think there's a difference between things that restore independence and things that restore convenience.
Yes.
For me to regain bladder and bowel function, that is restoring a huge deal of independence in my life. I can get where I need to go in this chair for the most part. And so walking necessarily wouldn't like change my world in that sense. It would just make some things more convenient. But you know, my wheelchair's pretty good.
Cole's wheelchair gives him freedom, a lot of freedom. He's not bound to his wheelchair. He's not confined to his wheelchair. His wheelchair gives him freedom. It's not Cole's priority, and if he could choose anything to get back, walking would probably fall further down on the list.
There was another article published fairly recently that only 2 people sent to me. It was my mom and dad, and it was about a study that's being advanced to phase 2 clinical trials in humans for a molecular compound that will help the spinal cord regenerate itself. This is equally exciting to me because the epidural stimulator is going to help out a lot of people in a lot of ways, but it's still very much in its early stages. It doesn't solve all the problems, and it takes a great deal of rehab to actually realize that return of function. Because when you get that epidural stimulator put in, rehab becomes your full-time job. It's not like you just click it on and then immediately it works.
Yeah.
No, you have to go through hours and hours and hours and hours of rehab for months.
A lot of people assume that it's like Cole said, you just get it clicked on and it works right away. But there's so much rehab, and not a lot of people have the time to be able to literally give up everything to focus on working out 8 hours a week, 8 hours a day, you know, 7 days a week.
So it's almost a question of like, is it worth putting my whole life on hold to get a little bit of function back? Which is an interesting question. And I'm sure people without paralysis would be like, oh, well, of course, I'd do whatever it takes. But, you know, I'm kind of happy with my life. You know, we have stuff figured out. We have a routine. It's very normal.
You've been in a chair for 10 years.
Yeah.
I think that's something to consider when you've been in this situation for 10 years. You adjust, you accommodate, you find newfound happiness with your situation. And it's just like, you know what, I've gotten so used to where my life is. Do I want to stop everything to go back to where my life used to be, to walk again? Like, it's just, I think time makes a big difference. Maybe someone who was injured a year ago or a few months ago or 2 years ago may have a different perspective than someone like Cole who's been injured 10 years or even more.
Going back to that other compound from the article my parents sent me, if those phase 2 clinical trials in humans go well, that's really going to be a game changer, because if that can be approved and that can be shown to have the efficacy it needs to like become a more mainstream treatment, that can be used with the epidural stimulator in a combinatorial treatment, and both of those modalities are going to make a huge difference in tandem. And that's when I start getting really excited, because then you are thinking about, you know, a more fully formed recovery rather than just like, you know, a little bit here and a little bit there that might not really change your world.
And I think it's important to hear, you know, Cole's perspective when it comes to these studies and to learn more. And another thing that people message us about or comment on our YouTube about is the exoskeleton. So a lot of people who find our channel usually find that video first because it's like extremely popular. And a lot of people ask if we own the exoskeleton and why doesn't Cole use that more often? And so no, we don't own the exoskeleton. That was borrowed, or we used it through the hospital Sheltering Arms.
I think it's like $180,000 to buy one.
Oh yeah, it's super expensive. Some people do have it, but it's not very functional for Cole. Like, he couldn't just strap on the exoskeleton and just walk around the house and just use it, because he needs help. He doesn't have core, so he's not able to hold himself up. So maybe for a paraplegic or someone with more function, then Cole can use it, but for everyday life, it wouldn't be functional for Cole.
Yeah, and I have seen paras, and they're able to strap it on themselves. They're able to like roll around in their chair, and then using some lobster crutches, just stand right up and walk around. And that's super exciting for paras to be able to use that. For me, it's more of a rehab thing, for sure. It's more about, you know, getting some weight on my bones, help with my bone density, helps with the blood pressure, helps with, you know, getting those muscles down there contracting just through like spasms and stuff, and blood flow. All that stuff is very helpful. It's just like she said, it takes a team of 3 people to get it on, to stand me up, and like I'll have an hour-and-a-half session, and everything, just getting it set up and getting me standing up and then taking it down, that's like half or longer of our session. Me walking around isn't even that much. And
then Cole standing, as you have seen before, Cole gets very lightheaded when he stands, which is also a reason he can't walk for so long. Although his muscles are moving and the blood is going like throughout his body, it still is exhausting for his body to stand when it's not used to doing that. But it also really helps with giving standing hugs, which is why I love it too.
Yeah, love those huggy hugs. So going back to the epidural stimulator, one other thing that kind of turns me off of it at this stage is the fact that it is a very invasive surgery. I mean, they're literally implanting this onto your spinal cord. Like they're connecting this onto individual spinal fibers. That's about as invasive as you can get. But what's really cool is they're starting to find that the same technology can be used transcutaneously, which means that they can just put it on like your back, like along your spine, and then send shock waves into you, and boom, it's having a similar result, which is awesome, because then the clearances you need, like through the FDA, are way easier to get past. But if we can just slap a stimulator on someone's back and then have these same functional recoveries, that is going to be a real game changer. And that's when you can start using that in rehab right after someone gets hurt. You know, 2 weeks later, just slap it on and get that ball rolling from a very early stage, because it's way easier to get that recovery back when your body is still going through those changes rather than 10 years later like me.
Yeah, so a lot of these studies, you know, like Cole was saying, it's a lot better for people who have more acute injuries rather than chronic injuries.
And that is what is exciting about the epidural stimulator, is it's what's really focusing on the chronic population. I'm the chronic. So
you're the chronic.
I'm the chronic. The day where some of these very exciting treatments and modalities are combined is going to be the day where we are like seeing some extraordinary changes.
Yeah.
And I'm just waiting for that day to come. I do feel like it's coming. I think some really awesome stuff's happening, and we didn't even touch on like what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink. That's a whole other can of worms.
It's interesting reading all these articles and learning so much information. You know, both of us studied, you know, biology and psychology, and, you know, we're both really into like that medical world. And so it's really fascinating for us to learn more and to talk about it. I know we have a lot of people who are in that medical world too, so.
So that's our little science update on the SCI world.
Yeah.
If y'all enjoy this type of content, let us know, because sometimes I feel like I'm just like nerding out because, you know, like she said, I studied neuroscience. This is right up my alley. I've read so many research articles on this stuff.
We just didn't want you guys to feel like you're in a science class right now.
Yeah. But yeah, let us know what you think in the comments. We'd be curious to hear. And if you have other sciencey questions that you're curious about, you think we could help with, we'd like to hear them as well.
Yes. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and stay positive. Peace out.